it's some unwritten rule. I don't know who had
Because
the
you exotic.
conversation.
That's what.
It's not. It's not. It's, well, I can kind of speak on that just from an advertising perspective, and especially with
Yeah.
the U.S. Is that unfortunately a lot of times people forget that when models are hired to do like especially like campaigns, you're not there to reach out to people who look like you, which is why they always look for people regardless of ethnicity. It's quite interesting that most agencies, especially like in the US and Europe, always look for people that have features that kind of can go cross race, regardless of your skin tone, regardless of whether you're black, Asian, etc. If you look at it, they look at okay,
Right.
how will these person's features translate to people across various ethnicities? When you look at a market that is as multi-ethnic as the U.S., that's why you have a lot of. I'm quite sure both of you have a lot of you know young white boys who want to be just like you when they grow up. They don't know
Mhm.
why exactly it is. Like they want to be models just like you, but there's a
We're not
reason.
typical. We're not typical
I
black
think
men in terms of like Armando said. He doesn't act ghetto. I don't act ghetto. I'm from the ghetto,
Well,
and no one
yeah,
believes it. Everyone's looking at me
I've
like you can't
you guys,
possibly be
and,
from the
and and
ghetto.
I've
Like
had the same, and
I,
it's quite funny that I've had the same experience you guys are talking about in two different places. So
wow,
both in the U.S. and in Angola, people say always told me I sound white.
right.
Because when I got to the U.S., I still, I came from Portugal, so I still had a Portuguese accent with a British twang, and a lot of my behaviors were Angolan. They were
Mhm.
not American. So
Mhm.
most black people who saw me, my age group, said, "Okay, he looks like us, but he acts different. Therefore, he's like an other thing that we
Yeah.
can't quite identify." And
Yeah.
then white people had the same issue because they're like, "Okay, it's someone who is black. His name sounds Latino, but his language is not Spanish. So we don't quite know what box you fit in." But then the Latinos
No, they
embrace me
say,
because they're
oh,
also
but
they're also kind of in between. So
he's educated. He speaks eloquently, and he
yeah,
doesn't act like the other. And that's the problem. And it's sad because I
yeah.
think even more so within the black community happens. I mean, for me, I remember recently when I said, yeah, we're the African. The guy said, oh, so you're finally African now? You're finally with us? It's like, I've always been. So this racial division that happens. I think no, seriously, we laughing, but
Yeah.
I find it as a big problem, and I think that just to talk about why I was so inspired to really bring about this, history of African, probably best times that people don't really know is that I feel like it's compelling to tell that story to my children. I want them to know these things so they don't grow up with this skewed,
Hmm.
mindset of knowing these things. And it comes from, us knowing our own history. Like, we need to know who we are. We need to know what the black man represents, like my brother was just saying earlier. What is it being black man? We've been told that, we have the same issues, like woman is the priority, but we cannot show our emotions. We have to bear all the problems. We have to go out there and kill lions to bring home. And when you fail to do so, you're not a man. And all of those things, I think is conversation to have now moving forward in order to kind of like a support system. I think first of all, this is beautiful that we have it. This is almost as a therapy that we as a
it
man we don't
is
really have this.
Right.
Name a talk
very
show that have men sitting and talking about their own problems. Tell me.
No,
How
Armando,
many of
it
them
let
we
me
have?
would be considered
let,
chauvinistic if
And
if
let me
and
let
if
me
that
this
tell
is
you
the
happened.
outlet that we
let me
need.
tell, let me tell you something, and let me go as far as this, brother Coréon Dú, you'll echo me on that. Actually, all of you, I received a message from a couple of so-called feminists saying, "Well, an all-male panel again," and I'm like, and then it's like, what is that supposed to mean? Like we are all men from, first of all, different backgrounds, different skin colors, even though we come from the same mattress, right?
Hmm.
And we all have different looks at life. I mean, come on, man. Why can't we just have a space where we can actually even hold space and honor for also the feminine that is inside of us as well? It's not like we're denying it. We're actually embracing every aspect of it. And on that regard, then allow me to then I wouldn't say necessarily go make a 360 turn from what you just said, Brother Armando. And however, I guess I would actually take the conversation now to the stylistic, the looks, the elegance, the apparatus, the gravitas of the brothers. And I want to give the floor to Brother Nunas before I pass on the floor to the rest of you brothers. Brother Nunas, let's talk a little bit about this Afro Sartorialism. Big shout out to our brother De Fustel, who's actually one of the big defender and ambassador of the Afro Sartorialism. But I think it's a very interesting conversation to have. What is sartorial talks from an African perspective, and what is African elegance? What does it mean from the perfume, from the way we put cream on our bodies, from the way we look at ourselves, after ourselves? Come on, let's go, Nunas, let's go, hit us.
There are many ways to look at, but this thing, I'm very curious to see what Badi will say, because you guys invented this kittendism thing, which I believe it's equal to sapeur in the it's a dandism,
yes.
right? This guy's in this thing, and like I myself, coming from my New York background, like when I arrived back in New York in 2003. I always had this thing for fashion, but back then I was like more of a Sean John. I wanted to wear these things. But when I arrived there, the funny thing is, like, I felt like, the ghetto people were wearing that too. And so I said, I don't want to be wearing this. It's not in fashion. And that was probably the time that also skinny jeans is coming into the game and things. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to start wearing this style and, slim a little bit here and there. Start driving away the rocker wear, all the basketball jerseys out, the t-shirts, all white t-shirts, all V-necks and stuff start coming in until, let's say, fast forward 2012, when I moved out. I also got tired of that, and Afrocentrism, and see the elegance of the wax in Africa was growing, and also probably the dandism of the sapeurs, the Congolese sapeurs, was coming in, and I probably went more on that line afterwards. And I like this vintage style, and mixed with some African stuff, and always try to create new possibilities in my personal closet, and also appreciate people on the same vibe. Like Badi here is my comrade. Definitely, we here in Brussels, we always like to hang out and do what sapeurs do. and that's pretty much my man. That's
but go ahead. Mm-hmm.
I want to get to Virgil Abloh all the way up to what they just dropped with this new Louis Vuitton collection, and especially that market where you see a lot of people, because from the top that thing looks like Congo, man. Looks like this suppose in Congo at Grand Marché or something, everybody passing and I mean, not saying that that's what it is, but to me, it really brought me a lot of what these sapeurs are doing to us black men. Let's put it in the fashion world. I think it's quite impressive what they created and they keep on doing. But yeah, I'll pass it on the ball to the pros. You guys are the guys.
Brother Lono, can you speak on that, because you also came from an era in time where you literally rubbed shoulders with some of the greats. I mean, you said it very beautifully in your introduction. Please drop us some Basquiat stories, drop us some Keith Haring stories, drop us some of that, brother, and drop us some of that now too. We want to hear that, brother. Share the gold.
Well, let me. Okay, absolutely. Well, getting back to what Nunas said a little bit about that point about
definitely
when fashion was kind of turning away from hip hop clothing into dandyism. I think America sort of really came a little bit late to the party on that, because for me, you know, I was involved with and probably shared responsibility for helping usher in streetwear into what we now know to be mainstream fashion. The way I did that was I got involved with a brand. Well, living in New York in the 80s, like Boddhi said, I was hanging around downtown. I only lived in downtown, so I didn't really go. I would go to Harlem, go to Brooklyn occasionally, Harlem on weekends, because it was, you know, you could get more, you know, Afrocentricity. But downtown was where everything was happening. I'm talking 1985, 86, around then. But what was happening downtown was this big sort of like melting pot of cultures, all kind of clashing together and all kind of intermingling. And that was normal. That was the, you know, I mean, I used to go to punk rock clubs. I used to go to reggae clubs. I went to house music clubs or discos. But all these different scenes all kind of came together, and, you know, that kind of influenced where style was going. Back then, you were celebrated for being different. You know, now it's everybody kind of looks the same. Everybody dresses the same. When the trend happens, everybody goes with that trend. If you know, a fashion house or a big brand decides this is the inspiration or this is the look, then everybody does that. It wasn't the case back in the 80s. In the 80s, the more individual you were, the more unique you were, the more you were celebrated. And I think myself, kind of how I was able to enter into that world was because I looked at a little bit of everything. I was into punk rock. I was into reggae. I was into rock and roll. I was into soul. I was into R&B. And then hip hop was starting to emerge. And hip hop came on so strong, there was no denying it. But there were no fashion brands for hip hop. Most of what people were wearing was more regional. Guys in Queens dressed more like Run DMC. Guys in Harlem dressed more like, you know, Dougie Fresh, and they were Uptown in Harlem had its own kind of vibe, and people understood that. Me personally, being from the South Side of Chicago, you know, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but you know, we have this gangster thing that's been going on since Al Capone in the 1920s and 1930s. So Chicago always leaned more towards a gangster kind of a thing, and even though it's a very big city, it still has a lot of small town kind of vibe to it. But anyway, like I said, you know, taking all of this into consideration, I somehow learned how to amalgamate all of that and create my own personal style, which allowed me entry into places that the average person wasn't able to go, because New York was very segregated, especially downtown. Celebrities, along with regular street kids, you know, skaters and, you know, rappers and DJs and drag queens, and just everybody all hung out together. And there was no discrimination. The only discrimination was that you didn't belong because you didn't understand what this was. If you had an understanding of it, you could have entry into it. And I worked at a nightclub back then called Nell's. And Nell's was kind of the post Studio 54. After that meltdown happened in disco and this new sort of thing was starting to happen downtown, Nell's became the epicenter. I think Nell's opened in 86. I started working there in 87 and got asked to work there, and became acquainted with, you know, most of who was controlling what was happening downtown as it related to music, art, fashion, everything like that. And so I started to watch what was happening with skaters. I had a couple of friends that we were into the same kind of music, and I never was a skater, but they skated, and I watched kind of what they were doing, and they watched kind of what we were doing, and it kind of all came together. And so in 1990, 89, well, my son, I was married to a Japanese woman. So my oldest son, Lono Brazil III, was born in New York in 1988. So probably 88, 89, I started going to Tokyo. And, you know, back then, if you wanted to know what was happening, you couldn't go online and, you know, search or look at someone's Instagram. You had to actually go there to see what was happening. You know, so that's what I used to do. So I started traveling. I think I told this story before.
Yeah, you did. And by the way, brother, not to cut you, but we got Sister Kiara saying that I used to go to nails. I used to get all types of drunk at nails.
Yeah, it was that kind of place. I mean, and the thing about it was a private club